All right, Joe Biden's stagflation probably going to stop the Fed from cutting rates anytime soon. That, among other headlines, we welcome back to the show Mr. Jason Furman, former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, now teaching school at Harvard. Jason, welcome back. And another Jason Trennert, chairman and CEO of Strategas Securities. Gentlemen, thank you. Jason Furman, go to you, furthest away. You got an inflation problem, a lingering, stubborn inflation problem. We could debate the GDP up and down. I see pluses and minuses. But how's the Fed going to cut rates this year if inflation is sticky, as we've just seen, and the PCE deflator, the last 3 months, 4.5% annualized, and so forth and so on? What's your take on all that, Jason?
Yeah, so, Larry, I did want to take you on that stagflation claim. We definitely have inflation that's too high. Mm-hmm. It's come down. It's much less bad than it was a year ago, but it is too high. But we don't have stagnation. We have the fastest growing economy of the major advanced economies. We have an unemployment rate that's been below 4 for 2.5 years now. And so the reason the Fed isn't cutting rates is partly the bad news on inflation, that it's disappointed us, but a lot of it is the good news. They're just not worried about a recession. If anything, they think the economy's growing too fast, not too slowly.
Well, I'll take a half a loaf, Jace. I say if inflation is rising, but growth is slowing, at least from the first quarter. And I was reading some of your remarks, which I always enjoy. But you know what? The business side, particularly business equipment, having fallen in 4 of the last 8 quarters, and I was just looking up, even the 4-quarter change for business equipment is only 1%. So, Jason, my point is, if business doesn't start to produce, you're going to have stagflation.
Yeah, if you look at business fixed investment, that grew at about 2.7, 2.8. Don't hold me to the decimal place there. Business structures have been super strong. Intellectual property's been pretty good. I agree that equipment has been weak. And I agree that we've had an expansion that has been, mostly driven by consumers. I'd rather see a bit more of it driven by businesses, a bit less by consumers.
Yeah, I know that's right. That's logical enough. Jason Trennert, Fed interest rate cutting, it looks dead for the year. But what's your take on this and the whole conversation?
Well, I think it's hard to ignore the fact that we're running budget deficits of 7% of GDP at full employment. We've only run budget deficits this large at times when the unemployment rate was above 7. Mm-hmm. So that's why I would take some issue with what Mr. Furman is talking about, because it's not surprising you don't have a recession, because there's absolutely no coordination between monetary and fiscal policy. Mm-hmm. And that's why we have an inflation problem. So I guess you can try to spike the football and get very excited about the growth that you're seeing in the economy, but you're doing it by borrowing from the future with massive increases in the debt levels.
And by the way, I should have been more explicit in my riff. Its personal borrowing costs are very high. Mortgages, automobiles, and credit cards. And the Wall Street Journal editorial today makes an important point, and that is, if you adjust hourly wages adjusted for inflation, when Mr. Biden came into office, it was $11.40. Today, it's $11.11. So they've lost money in the last 3.5 years. I think that is a key reason, not only for sluggishness in the economy, but also for the poor polls that Joe
Absolutely.
Biden has.
You and I have talked about this. I'm a broken record on this, but we've created this common man CPI, which is the opposite of core. It's stuff that's really core. It's food, it's inflation, it's housing, it's clothing, insurance, and utilities. That has grown by faster than wages by about 8% over the past 3 years. Mm-hmm. So the average person's standard of living has declined. Real wages may have started to increase slightly in the last couple of months, but it's the cumulative effect of inflation that people are responding to. That's why the confidence is so low. That's why people are so grumpy, despite the fact that you're close to full employment. Yeah. People have gotten poorer. And of course, inflation is the tax that hurts the working classes and middle classes the most. Wealthy people don't notice it, but the average person notices it every day.
And Jason Furman, you did say the other day, and I agree with this, that if you start canceling all these student loans, all right, I'm going to call it $500 billion, that will add to consumer demand. There's no free lunch there. And that, in turn, will add to inflation and interest rates, including higher mortgage rates.
Yeah, look, Larry, I agree, by the way, we have a deficit problem. And you look at the president's budget, he has a lot of deficit reduction in it. If he could get Congress to pass his budget, the deficit would come down. That would help bring inflation down. Unfortunately, he can't come close to getting that to happen with this Congress. The student loan thing that he did by executive authority goes the other direction. I think it's unfortunate that was adding to the deficit. And, but if, you look at his plan as a whole, it's better than the subset of it that he was able to get done administratively.
But he wants to close the deficit with a huge tax hike. I mean, depending on which, it's sort of a moving target, but it basically looks like something between $3 and $5 trillion tax hike. Jason, that's not, you'll never get those revenues because the economy will sink. I mean, that's not really deficit reduction. I see deficit reduction as spending restraint. He wants to see it as tax increases. How can tax increases be good for the economy?
First of all, I don't think you've ever seen a tax increase that you didn't think was massive. His would
that is true,
bring back, say the top rate.
I don't like high taxes.
The top rate.
Yeah.
That top rate goes back to 39.6%. That's what it was under Obama. We had a perfectly fine economy then. Clinton, same thing. The corporate tax rate goes to 28%. That's a whole lot lower than the 35 it used to be. A couple of years ago, the BRT was asking for, I think, 25. It's only a little bit above that. So, I think we have to cut spending and raise taxes. None of it's going to be easy. None of it's going to be super pleasant. But we need to get towards paying our bills.
You'll never get the deficit reduction with gigantic tax hikes. Just never going to happen. But you're right. I don't like tax hikes. I like spending restraint. I like economic growth. Now, Jason Trennert, the Committee to Unleash Prosperity has a piece today. This is from the Treasury Department, Advancing Equity Through Tax Reform. They're arguing that the capital gains tax is inherently racist because it helps upper-end wealthy people more than it helps lower-income blacks and Hispanics. Whites do own more homes and have a higher stock ownership. And then it goes on to say how great it is. They're proposing a 44.6% capital gains tax rate. What do you make of that?
I think the depths of that stupidity are kind of stunning. Mm-hmm. I just don't see how the way to lift people up is not to make other people poor. The way to increase equality is not to make other people poorer. It's to bring people up out of poverty. If you're going to increase the capital gains tax, you're going to have less capital, which means less employment, which means the people at the bottom rungs of the economic ladder are going to be hurt the most. This is not the way to do it. This is not a supply side, clearly not a supply side approach, not a supply side view of the world, which you and I both share. And I can't think of anything that would hurt the poor and the working classes more than increasing the capital gains tax rate.
If you dry up capital, I don't know how they're going to accumulate assets. I don't know. I mean, they'll end up paying the same if they ever succeed. It's a crazy thing. Anyway, we're running out of time. Jason Furman, thank you. Jason Furman, thanks again. Jason Trennert, thanks very much for coming on set. We appreciate it.